right. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining today. This is Tara Bradley with The Growth State, and I'm very excited to have AJ Yager with us today. AJ Yager is an influencer and entrepreneurial doer. Try saying that 7 times fast. I had to practice that one. He has spent his entire redheaded life since the age of 10 building businesses, both online and offline, in the areas of magazine publishing, computers, supplements, real estate, agriculture, and sports. He's the co-founder of Praxis Metrics. Most recently has started Yager Media Group, and that is a business that's dedicated to our sweet spot, which is small and medium-sized businesses, helping them generate more leads, increase our revenue online. So thank you, AJ. I'm super excited to have you today.
That's right. I'm honored. Thank you so much. And thanks for the awesome, intro.
Yeah, I'm excited. So data's a little bit of a shift for you, if I'm understanding your history correctly. And if you're like me, and I think like a lot of the people that are in this niche where we've started companies and they're starting to scale and grow, there was probably some pain point where you're like, hey, this was painful for me. I had to figure it out. Now I figure I can monetize it and really help people out. What was that pain point for you that kind of led you down the path of Praxis Metrics?
You hit the nail on the head. It was a pain point, literally. So I'm going to back up a little bit and just kind of share. So I'm not the typical data nerd you're talking about who loves to be in Excel, who loves to be in the data, and who is like a data scientist. But I understand how important it is to business. And rewind about, like 9 years ago, almost a decade ago, when I was actually even further than that, my dad is like a scientist, and he is a brilliant farmer who is always very, very data driven and very analytical and had big, huge Excel charts and everything. So I was exposed to it early on, but I didn't really realize till I was in marketing how important being data driven was and what that actually meant, from data collection and tracking things to the assimilation, the analysis of that, and then going and taking action from it. So it was part of my upbringing as I was building businesses, as I was growing. But then the real true pain point came in about 6 years ago when my partner and I, Megan, had really met, and I was running a data-driven marketing organization where we built like funnels, webinar funnels and all that kind of stuff. But where we were different is that we weren't just saying, hey, we're going to go on gut and we're just going to have a great copywriter and run it. We're looking at, like, what does the data tell us first? Let's look at your Google Analytics. Let's look at what data you do have, even if it's not a lot. Let's try to figure out what funnels are working. And for startups, if they didn't have anything, it's like, well, what are the assets we're working with here? And starting with data and like that true like point in time allowed us to then project forward, like what's the best next step we can take, gather data again, and then make another iteration. And so doing that in the marketing agency, we then kind of understood, like, we were doing it successfully, but I wasn't as scalable, me and the company and my team of about 12 people that time. But we noticed the one thing that everybody had problems with, and the one thing that most clients were excited about, were the fact that we knew so much about their company and their marketing offers that they didn't know. And so they're like, oh, well, if you can do this for my marketing, can you do this for my operations, my finance, my customer service, my sales, and all that? And so then it's kind of like, well, anybody can do the marketing stuff. A lot of agencies out there, nobody, especially 6 years ago, were doing kind of big data enterprise level thinking, but doing it at a small and medium-sized business. So that was that turning point for us that created Praxis Metrics.
Oh, that's great. And you bring up a really good point. You mentioned big data. I think people in this particular space where they've, got a company that's scaling and they're trying to figure out where to put their dollars, the term big data scares the crap out of most people. They're like, yeah, I don't even know how to get a good spreadsheet and good financials, let alone big data. Just looking at their data story in general in this space, where do they start? Like, where is a great place to start and say, hey, if I know these, points, or that I need to, maybe I don't have them, maybe I need to start capturing them. What's a good place to focus on when you're just getting started to really put together a great data story?
That is the question. I'm so glad you asked that. So big data can be scary, and truly big data was a word that really, to me, it doesn't truly exist anymore. Big data is now like, on our phones. We have so much data. You can't see my phone, but right. I've got it holding a phone. On our watches, everything. Like, there's so much data coming in all the time. It's here and now. So we like to say that the being data driven is the most competitive advantage you can have in a business, because if you don't understand your data, your competitors do, and they're going to beat you. That's just the nature of the fact. And in fact, I want to instill this: every single business is in the data business. You just don't realize it yet. And those who do are the ones that have that head start. So let's just on that, data doesn't have to be scary. Data equals information. That's it. It's information in your business. That's why they call it BI, business intelligence. Right? You're being able to assimilate the information. So at the founding part here, I'm going to bring up a visual as well, to kind of help illustrate this, because it's just important to understand that there's a data maturity spectrum here that we all need to go through. And so I'll kind of do one step at a time. So this is the data maturity spectrum. We look at it in kind of these 4 different buckets. There's data collection, there's automation, optimization, and maximization. And I will say a caveat: if you're on LinkedIn or if you're on any social media right now, you're going to see AI, all this machine learning, and all these cool things that are coming out, and like a lot of like stuff that think people are saying, oh, you got to be doing AI now, all this. I would just eliminate that, especially if you're in startup mode. That's not the important part. What is important is a foundation of data, because those things are not even doable.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, here we go. Those aren't even, see, data isolation, machine learning, artificial intelligence, data compliance, all that stuff is over here when you get to be a bigger, more mature company, revenue-wise, team-wise, and all that. So I want to start over here on the left side. We need to build a foundation that can ensure success or help you get closer to success by having a great product market fit, great marketing, great team, of course, all important. But you've got to make sure you're collecting the right data. And that is tracking. Google Analytics is a wonderful, free, powerful tool that 90% of companies do not set up correctly the first time. They think putting the code on the page is, oh yeah, I use Google Analytics, it's great, but then they never go into it. They're never really getting insights, right? So GA is a great place to start, as well as UTMs. That's urchin tracking mechanism. We don't have time to go too in depth. We've got courses and stuff on that, and I've got other videos to show you, but this is like how you can specifically track every single marketing sales initiative you do online, so that we can see where your best customers are coming from, where people, what's working, where your lifetime value is, and all of that. So tracking, data collection is number 1, defining your KPIs, and then also creating some SOPs around your team members, from sales to marketing to everything, on like tracking what they're doing. So that's the big like starting point. And I'll stop there if you want to ask any questions before we go on.
Maybe not just a question, but I think a clarification, and I think you'll hit on this as we get into it. But data collection, absolutely. Just knowing what you're collecting, and this is where you first start to define those KPIs. But I want to point out to everybody listening, they're KPIs. They're key, indicators of performance. And that's not everything. Like, you're not tracking and trying to put something meaningful to every metric that you collect. It's the ones that are going to have the most impact on your business. They're actionable. You can twist a knob and have a different outcome. I think people, This is where they can get really bogged down in this first phase, because they try to track everything. They try to control everything. And it's not going to long-term have any indication on the performance of their business. They've really got to nail down 3, 4, 5 metrics, and that's it in this stage, and just do them really, really well.
You said it. It's like, we like to call them the needle movers.
Yeah.
What are the needle moving, or you've also, if you read Growth Hacking, there's like North Star metric, Facebook's daily active users. That's the one big metric that if they do that, everything else is easier or unnecessary. So especially in the beginning, less is more. So I'm going to show how do we get to that point? Let's talk about, let's kind of focus this to like not have overwhelm. And yeah, you can have hundreds of KPIs eventually, but that's going to be really, really confusing. So what we do in the beginning is something called, it's understanding your business questions. We do something called metrics mapping. And so from top down here, let's look at, what are we trying to achieve? What are the goals, right? Whether it's, hey, this year we want to hit annual revenue of this, or we want to launch this marketing program, short-term, long-term goals, whatever they may be, like any business should. Let's get clear on where we're headed. Then from there, what are those business questions? This comes before the KPIs. You can see KPIs are down here. What are the business questions that you can ask that are going to help you achieve your goals? So getting clear by department or just overall as a team, understanding the different, whether it's marketing, finance, operations, whatever, however you split up your company, get very clear on 5 to 10 of the most important business questions. One of the exercises to go through and just as a team, whiteboard this and list all the questions, get it all out of your head. Then next step is to then prioritize them. What are the ones that are, especially in startup mode, what are those 5 or 10 that we need to focus on now as a company? And then assign an owner to that. Who on the team is going to own it? And last but not least, but like the most important part, what action are we going to take from that KPI? So we do all of that right here. First in the blue area, so business goals, business questions, and then identifying those metrics that will help you answer those business questions. And then you start aligning, well, we need lifetime value, we need customer acquisition costs. Like under the marketing ones, they're pretty basic and you can do some searches on that. We even have some examples. But after you're clear on where we're headed, then we need to go into the rest of the metrics mapping process, which is identifying your tech sources. So basically, where is your, what are the tech sources that you're using? Google Analytics, Shopify, Klaviyo, Magento, Asana. Like, what is the technology that makes up that's collecting data, right? Then, okay, let's cross-reference that to the data sources. So they can also be different databases or just the technologies, but we need to find out where's our data live? Like, where the heck is it being collected and where is it being stored? Then last but not least, without getting too detailed, we're defining formulas and filters. And last but not least, how you're going to digest the information, like visualizing it, table format, bar charts, like all the pretty stuff. But that's all the sexy stuff that you'll see on Instagram. That's like shows a cool boardroom with a great dashboard up there. That is like the last thing we care about is making it sexy. Right now, we need to make sure the data is accurate and make sure that your team is clear on where we're headed.
Yeah. And I love that you bring up the dashboard. I can remember going through with a former company and we were looking at an acquisition target. He's like, oh, look at that room. It's like a control center. I said, we have all those same metrics. We just didn't put them on a fancy board.
Right.
I said, that's not going to get us anywhere. So I love that you bring that up. And I love the progression of this because it's very similar to what I'm familiar with is, start with the end in mind, right? Like this is what we're looking towards. And the one thing that I think sometimes we forget about data is it is all a big science experiment, right? Like we track these things so we can make little tweaks and say, okay, that made a difference. And I think one of the things that you can't forget is getting it down to that personal level, right? Like I want data that tells my people, how do I keep score? How do I know that I'm getting the things that kind of go up to that North Star and move through that? And so I love that you brought up that doesn't have to be pretty and sexy. It just has to make sense. And they have to know that it ties back to the business goal for sure.
Yeah. And that's part of why I think people thought it was really, well, it can be hard and it can be expensive if you take it on in too big of a project and think, oh, well, I'm going to go be data driven now. And they don't do these steps first. This is the basics. This is just getting it aligned. And then the next step is after this is all done, we're going to take it through a KPI prioritization matrix. What is the business impact, right? Versus the feasibility. So we've got low value, high value, low feasibility, high feasibility. This chart here that we've created is this is an example, but basically what we want to do is focus on this area right here, right? This becomes priority 1. The fact that it's going to be incredibly valuable to our team to know the answer to this question and that it's feasible, meaning we're already collecting the data. We know where it lives. Like we went through that checklist, right? This one right here. And we know these answers. That's wonderful. And also then it gets to a point where you work with a team like Praxis or other teams, or you have somebody on your team that's able to turn this into like, okay, now we need to build the dashboard. We need to pull the data out. Some people, I'll go back up here. Some people are stuck in a spreadsheet hell, which is, it's not a bad or good thing. It's just a neutral place. It's like, great, at least you're pulling it all into one place. It may suck and you may be frustrating and there may be human error, but at least you've got the data, you're starting to become data driven and have it in one place. That's okay. But then it's about like really using this feasibility matrix and identifying, okay, now that we've made that whole list and we've identified 5 to 10 of them, which ones are actually feasible and the highest business value. So then it's like, kind of like, this is the one thing we're going to focus on first, and we're going to go iterate from there. And then that whole list starts moving over into the prioritization matrix as they become more feasible as you're figuring out you're tracking them. So hopefully this helps with that whole value and prioritization of all the KPIs.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And so I think you hit on it when we talked earlier. You said, data really is just information and it's synthesizing information. But I love how you laid it out here because you're kind of laying out the path of when it goes from being just information to being power, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something that you can really capitalize and make a huge differentiator. A number of the people that we've talked about or talked to in this summit have said, know your numbers, know your numbers, know your numbers, which I think is great. But knowing the power in your numbers and how to use those for sales enablement and some of those different things, I think is really the shift. So talk to us a little bit how you shift from, okay, I know I have KPIs and I understand they're actionable, to really getting into that power place where you're like, this is a differentiator and this is how I can use this to really catapult my business in a lot of different ways.
That's a great question. So yeah, once we get all this part done, it's up to someone on the team and the whole team to take responsibility for those metrics and take action on them. But it's also easier. It's easier said than done. So part of it, I think, is that once it's gathered, there's that whole next step of like analyzing it and keeping it top of mind. So I'm a big believer in time blocks. I think if you don't put it on your calendar, it's not going to happen. So we need to take the time out of our schedules. Some people need to look at it daily, others weekly, and as a team weekly, and then monthly. There needs to be some sort of a cadence and an annual a framework of which you're bringing the data in. Yes, we know it's accurate now. We know what our KPI prioritization is. Now we know who's going to own it. Auditing, are we actually doing that stuff? Are we actually making those things priority and monitoring them consistently enough in the dashboard, or setting up alerts to let us know if something goes higher than this and that's a bad thing, who needs to be notified, and like actually going and doing that. So I think number one, it's taking the time to what I call review my data, RMD time. Review my data. It's very simple. I think everybody should have RMD time scheduled into their daily or weekly, depending on your role. And then that's a great way to be sharing, democratizing it across the company, so that the team can see the big like KPIs that's going to move the needle for everybody. But then there's also like the individual people are, their job basically is like, look, this one metric is you got to own this. And so I think that's a really big piece, is just adding into the schedule and then being very consistent and accountable to those metrics. And I hope that's answering your question, but I think that's like the starting point.
Definitely. So definitely having the time to block it, or to block out and review those, being consistent, and then obviously taking the action. And I'm a huge fan of that. I block out 3 hours every Monday morning, dashboard reviews.
Nice.
All I do.
Nice.
And just to make sure I can move it forward. A lot of what we talked about so far today has been kind of operational metrics, but I think it's important for people to understand there's almost buckets, right? Like there's your operational bucket. There is your, client success and delighter and data. And let's be honest, a lot of times we know our clients' data better than they do, and what better way to sell them, right? And keep them. And then there's almost this sales bucket that goes beyond just the funnel, right? And the numbers. It's almost like, how do we use our data for enablement? How do you view those in the data story? And is there a different strategy for each, or is there something that you can kind of spread across the way that makes it very consistent?
Well, I think here I'm understanding it this way. So like everybody, for the most part, I don't like the word everybody, but the majority of companies and brands will start with the sexy stuff, the sales and marketing, right? That creates the highest ROI. And that's where most of them, especially in startup mode, like you need a cash flow, you need to get these things working, you need to get this profitable, or at least get minimal viable products set up. So I think the sexy ones are the sales and marketing. And we've got I call it a desert island list, which are the ones we recommend that people look at. And that is revenue, cost of goods sold. So knowing your costs, like true cost all the way through. Return on ROI, and ROAS, like return on ad spend, customer lifetime value, and allowable cost per acquisition. Like these are what we've seen over 180 different brands are like, if you only have 5, like these are the ones to go do. But again, this is really that kind of top of funnel part, except for the cost of goods sold. I think this is one of the ones that people miss the most. They think, oh, we'll do the finance metrics later. Let's just focus on the marketing. But then many companies can lose their ass by just not knowing their costs and like going downhill really quickly, where they see the revenue coming in, they're checking the bank, but they don't truly know what's happening behind the scenes. So I think marketing, sales, if I were to tier those, then it's the finances, getting those cogs. And then you're looking at the more operational ones, if I were to prioritize those in that way. But that's how we look at it. And that's how, when we're servicing our clients, that's usually the route it goes in that kind of order, unless they're a larger company and they're saying, look, we know that we need to get our finance stuff in order, or we're switching to NetSuite and we need to get, control of this. I think that's my answer. Did I answer your question okay?
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I love that you've got COGS on here and mentioned it as a pain point for people, because I think that's where we can get really tripped up, particularly if you're in a technology space, because
Right.
we think about development, we think about those costs we can get a hold of, but we forget about implementation and account management and services if you have it. And services
Yep.
is always tricky, right? Because you'll say, oh, we charge for every hour they're in there and then a margin, but they're rarely, assigned hour for hour. And
Right.
that other, whatever they're not getting paid for, has to go into your COGS, and it messes up your margin, and you have to have a really good understanding of it. So how do they get their arms around it if it's a new concept to them, or they just don't have a good handle on it?
Great question. So I'll tell you, I'll answer this with a story. So in 2018, we were plagued with that problem, in that we thought we knew we were doing well. We had revenue coming in. And so at the end of the year, Megan and I, as partners, we always have like a deep dive into our business data, like looking at, okay, let's like assimilate everything. We've got our own dashboards and all that too, but we were like wondering, like, okay, we have more clients coming on. We have great revenue. We have a nice small team. Everybody's hustling, but why is our profit level so low? And what we did is, like, after 2 days of digging through things, we realized we were still acting in the mindset of a startup, meaning we had team members who were marking things non-billable or doing work for free that added up to $500,000 in lost money. And we're like, oh my God, we've been saying, hey, we'll do anything. Yes. Okay. We'll just make the client happy. But we were past that point. We were doing over $1.5 million in revenue. It was successful at that time. It's like, but us as owners, like, where's our profit? One metric changed that. And that was our COGS. That was on truly understanding and switching to our team. Hey, guy, like, you're giving away too much. We need to make sure that we are better on scope and that we can improve these aspects. But let's make our metric lower non-billable hours our goal. And so once we did that, we saw like a 400% increase over the next 3 months,
Mm-hmm.
and with not a lot of more cost on the marketing side.
Yeah.
So just that one metric, just that one deep dive into numbers as a team. Well, her and I did, and we also have brought on some team members to like verify. But it's, again, that business question. Why is this happening? What data do we have to prove it? And then saying, okay, that's definitely it. That one thing we did completely changed the trajectory of our business.
I love that. And I know we're just about out of time, but I want to hit on that, because you bring up a really good point, and we're all in it, right? We're in that scaling mode. And I have never put it to this number. So I appreciate you sharing, giving that perspective, in that if you're in this niche and you're watching, it's because you're scaling and you're trying to figure out how to grow faster and move. You're not growing because you were given a bunch of stuff away. More than likely, you're growing because you're adding a ton of value. And if you're adding a ton of value, you don't have to give services away. You can say, and people know that they want to partner with you, and you're like, hey, if we want to continue to do this, I absolutely want to partner. I want to help you, but let's get clear about what's billable and what's not. And I can't continue to load all your files for nothing. And here, it doesn't have to be invasive, and you can have some clients that are special, right? You can say they're a key client for us, that reference, we use them for everything. We don't charge them for that. But this
Right.
is a critical point in your growth trajectory where you have to get really disciplined about doing whatever it takes to get a client, so you've got numbers and names behind you, to now I'm going to mature and say, hey, I'm adding value. Now I'm your partner, and I really want to
Yep.
partner. And I love that you brought up that this is a way to do that, because I think people are often frustrated with account management and how to grow it in this space, because they don't know how to put a metric to it that makes it really meaningful. And so I love that you kind of connect the two.
Yeah, we had to build out. We learned a few things, which is like, we need to be monitoring some mini North Star metrics within, which is like profitability per customer, right? Or project, however you want to see that. Like, and having somebody measure that, be like, okay, if we say we're going to do something and we scope it wrong, we need to learn from that again and make sure we scope it a totally different way. Or also find those people on the team who are just like giving stuff away. It's like, okay, we've talked about this. It's kind of like 2 strikes now. We can't do that. So to help these little tweaks, like, help you make those little decisions and those management decisions that can help affect the business in a huge way. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you brought that up. Thank you.
Well, and the other thing I think is interesting too is it affects our staffing model, right? Like we staff
Mhm.
to whatever we need to the business. And what you are going to find when you start tracking this metric and you start having those partnership conversations and you say, hey, yes, we can do that, but I'm going to have to bill you for that. You'll be surprised that your staffing trigger
Yeah.
grows a little bit because they're like, oh, I can do it myself. I mean, I call you because you do it, but now that I have to do it, I guess I'll do it because I'm not going to pay for it. And that's how you know which things are you doing are truly value add because they'll pay for them, and which aren't. It's just a nice thing to have. And if it's at a lighter, great, do it. But you got to think about the dollars and cents of it at some point.
Well said. Heck yeah.
AJ, we are just about out of time here. I could talk to you for hours on this very topic. Data. I'm a data nerd, so I'm a data nerd
Very
with
good.
no technical skills, right? So I'm like, give
Well,
me,
I'm the similar way. I got all my techies like that.
yeah.
I can only get there and be dangerous. So it is fun to talk about though. And it's really fun for us to like break down the complex and simplify it for business owners and team members who just like, are like, what is data and how do I do this? So I'm happy to have this conversation and we can go deeper another time too, if you want.
Yes, definitely. I look forward to that. Tell the people that are watching and listening today how they can get connected with you if they're interested in Praxis Metrics or just following all of the stuff that you're putting out on data.
Yeah, great. Well, the one main place is just go to praxismetrics.com. It's Praxis and then metrics, metrics.com. There is a great blog there, great information. We have some lead magnets too, like a how to 10x your business ebook, free download. And I think that's one of the best places to start. Plus, I'm launching a podcast called The Data Rich Show, and you'll be able to see it on the website as well and get access to it. It's going to launch in a couple of weeks, and it's a way of this same kind of conversation of like non-data people talking about data and how it affects the business and scaling and all that. So those are some of the best ways. And then also I'm on LinkedIn, AJ Yager, just AJYAGER.
Awesome. And we'll have all of those links and connection points on AJ's bio page so you can go out there and check it out. AJ, it's been fantastic. I really appreciate your time. We will absolutely be having another conversation because, like I said, I could talk about this for days. But thank you so much, and we will chat with you again soon.
It was my pleasure. Thank you. Bye, everybody.